It was late at night, at least the closest thing they had to night on the Ark. To retain some sense of normalcy, all the humans aboard slept and woke at around the same time every day. For that 8-hour span, the only living thing still awake on the space station was, well, the reason they were all there in the first place. The ultimate life form. That night, Shadow was overcome with a certain restlessness and took his time strolling through the dark corridors of the Ark. He has no destination in mind, but his feet take him back to the same place he spends most of his days, Gerald's laboratory. Shadow expected it to be like all of the others, dark and abandoned for the time being, but as he arrives, he sees a faint light coming from deep within the room. As he investigates, Shadow sees his own creator hunched over his computer, mumbling to himself, distraught. Whatever it is that's on Gerald's mind, it isn't good. Shadow walks towards his creator silently. He doesn't intend to sneak up on him, but he also sees no reason to make his presence known. Without putting much thought into it, Shadow reads what's on Gerald's monitor over the man's shoulder. He was normally more than happy to share his notes with Shadow on most days, though the majority of it all just went over Shadow's head. That night, Shadow had expected much of the same, but instead what he reads shocks him. Gunn was demanding that Gerald hand Shadow over immediately. They were done waiting for Gerald to give them the weapon they asked for, and were going to take the ultimate lifeform as payment, or else. Shadow gasps at the revelation, alerting Gerald to his presence. The man panics. He asks Shadow what he's doing here, what he saw. Shadow doesn't care about any of that. He cuts through it all and asks Gerald what he's going to do about Gunn. Gerald says he wouldn't possibly hand Shadow over. He'll find some way to save both Shadow and Maria. He's sure of it. Shadow isn't reassured. As much as he trusts his creator, something about this felt different. Gerald seemed to panic in a way that Shadow had never seen him before, and it was worrying. After a moment of consideration, Shadow says that he'll accept Gunn's terms. He will be the weapon they want him to be, if it means that Maria will be safe. Gerald objects immediately. He says that without Shadow, they'll be completely unable to cure Maria's NIDS. Shadow counters that him staying here is putting Maria at risk anyway. He's willing to make this sacrifice for her. Gerald says that they shouldn't focus on only Maria. Gerald didn't make Shadow for this. He was meant to protect, not to destroy. Shadow says that this is how he can best protect Maria, if Gerald will allow him to. Gerald does his best to argue against Shadow, but he's simply too stubborn. Gerald ultimately has the final word on if Shadow leaves or not, but he can't bring himself to override Shadow's wishes. Begrudgingly, Gerald says that he'll let Shadow go. He sends a message to Gunn that Shadow will be going with them and walks off to bed, feeling as if he's made an awful mistake. They break the news to Maria the next day. She's completely against this, angry that Shadow would abandon her. Shadow explains that he isn't abandoning her, that he's doing this for Maria's safety and for the safety of everyone aboard the Ark, but Maria is inconsolable. She's able to eventually understand why Shadow made his decision, but it still hurts to know that he's leaving. Gerald consoles her, but Shadow is too overcome by guilt to say anything to the girl. Things remain strained between them over the next few days before Shadow has to go back to the Earth. All too soon, the day of Shadow's departure arrives. Maria and Shadow say their goodbyes, and Maria apologizes for being rude to him ever since he said he was leaving. She just couldn't bear to lose him, and she knows that he'll have a hard time without her, too. Shadow says that he's more than strong enough to survive on his own, and he knows that Maria is as well. Maria breaks down one last time, and this time Shadow is there to comfort her. And if his eyes got a little wet while they were saying goodbye, it was probably just the wind or something. As they head out of orbit and back to the Earth, Shadow wonders exactly what Gunn will have him do. He asks some of the agents on the spacecraft what they imagine his assignments will be, and they all say that they have no idea. He'll simply have to wait until he actually gets in touch with his superior officer. Shadow nods, but he feels as if something is off, though maybe he's just worried about being back on the Earth for the first time. The first day is uneventful. They have him do a few tests, seeing what his abilities are, and he surpasses all expectations. To prove his durability, he even lets them fire live ammunition at him, only to see that their bullets are completely ineffective against the ultimate life form. The longer the tests go on, the more Gunn staff stare at Shadow. He decides to ignore them. They're unimportant. He doesn't even listen as his superior officer sends a call in to the head of Gunn, and they all come to a decision. When Shadow turns in for the night, he feels tired. He doesn't have to sleep, but he can, and for whatever reason, he feels especially drowsy tonight. Once he's unconscious, the temperature in his room rapidly drops. A strange fluid fills the area, and Shadow freezes. Literally. Gunn had decided after seeing his performance that the ultimate life form was simply too dangerous to keep around. However, rather than attempt to dispose of Shadow, they cryogenically froze him, in case they needed him again at some point in the future. And so, just like that, Shadow was out of the picture. Neither a weapon nor a cure. Just a secret in the closet of a government bureaucrat too scared to come to a final decision. Months pass, and aboard the Ark, Maria's health deteriorates. She's a strong girl, and she does her best to remain positive, but Gerald can tell it's having a toll on her. Maria had always had good days and bad days, but with how her disease was progressing, the latter was becoming far more common. It's making it hard for her to even enjoy herself on the rare days when her disease isn't making things difficult for her on its own. It takes a toll on Gerald as well. He dedicated his time to researching the disease as much as he can, but he finds very little of use. Day by day, he feels as if his efforts are more and more pointless. He had failed in his purpose and even handed over his greatest creation to Gunn of all people. Still, he perseveres and attempts to make the most out of a bad situation. Still, Gunn demands more of him. They want him to create more weapons for them, despite everything he had already done. As their arguments go on, Gunn grows more and more demanding. Eventually, they announce that they will no longer fund his research. Gerald is devastated. The Ark is being shut down, and Maria will have to go back to the Earth, where her health will only deteriorate even more quickly. Still, it's not completely hopeless yet. They could still find a cure, or at least a treatment for her in the near future. If only he still had access to Shadow, he may be able to at least put Maria's condition into remission. In a bit of desperation, Gerald messages Gunn before the Ark is shut down, asking if he can see Shadow one last time for his research, if only for a few hours. Gunn ardently refuses, and they say that Gerald can't see Shadow no matter the circumstance. This makes him suspicious. Gerald remembers hearing from Maria that Shadow hasn't responded to any of her letters, which they transmitted over radio rather than through physical means. This is all just a step too far. Shadow would never simply ignore Maria, no matter how busy he was. Everything altogether just makes Gerald feel as if something has gone wrong. His intuition tells him that there's more going on than Gunn wants him to know, and he needs to get to the bottom of it. After calling in a few favors from people Gerald was still on good terms with back on the Earth, he eventually learns the truth, just days before the Ark is shut down for good. Shadow's fate is relayed to him, and Gerald can't believe what he's hearing. The entire thing is just too cruel. In that moment, something inside Gerald breaks. Shadow, his greatest creation, something close to a son to him, had been lost, and it was his fault. He had failed Shadow. If he had just put his foot down, just made Shadow stay, then he could have prevented this. His sons were already capable of taking care of themselves, but Maria and Shadow had been relying on him to protect them, and he failed. Gerald decided then and there that he would not allow himself to fail Maria. There had to be something, anything he could do to save her. After a few hours of planning, Gerald knew what he had to do. Late that night, Gerald goes to wake Maria. The girl is confused, but she trusts her grandfather as he leads her into his lab. Gerald explains to Maria that the world is decades away from finding a cure for her disease, but that need not mean that she must succumb to it. Gerald reveals to Maria what he has built, a cryogenic freezing chamber. He could freeze Maria here until a time when they had found a cure for her, a cure that Gerald was sure was only a few decades away. Maria is horrified by what her grandfather is suggesting. She tells him that she doesn't want this. She doesn't want to be in stasis as her parents, her friends, as everyone and everything that she knows goes on living their lives while she waits for who knows how long for a cure that might not ever arrive. Maria would rather pass away surrounded by people she loves than survive alone. Gerald isn't listening. He had listened to Shadow's pleas to give him over to Gunn, and where had that gotten them? Shadow was lost, betrayed, and trapped underground, presumably to waste away forever. Gerald won't make the same mistake twice. Gerald tells Maria that he's only doing what's best for her. He grabs Maria and forces her into the chamber with ease, and starts the machine while Maria's muffled screams fill his ears. It hurts him to see her so scared, but he can't lose her. He can't let her die, not when he knows that there's anything that he can do to save her. Years pass. Soon the Ark and Project Shadow are nothing more than the memories of a few old scientists, buried under NDAs and gag orders. It's not until a particular mad scientist happens across his late grandfather's journal that the past rears its ugly head once again. Eggman, tempted by the promise of an ultimate weapon, breaks into a gun base and eventually frees Shadow from his prison. Upon awakening, Shadow is lost. He had no idea why his location had changed so dramatically, and waking up to see Eggman staring at him and demanding to know where the ultimate weapon is doesn't exactly give him a lot of context. He's able to at least piece together a few things. The person in front of him isn't Gerald, but they seem to be related to the man. Shadow asks how Eggman knows Gerald Robotnik, and Eggman, a bit surprised, explains that Gerald was his grandfather. Shadow is completely shocked. He knew of Ivo, but the boy was far too young. Shadow has no idea what's happened, but a lot of time must have passed since he was last awake. Eggman sees how confused Shadow is and explains that he had been cryogenically frozen by Gunn. Eggman says that he has no idea why Gunn would do this, but he suspects it was because they feared his power. Shadow is angry that they would betray him, of course, but what mattered most now was tracking down Maria and Gerald. He asks Eggman what has become of the pair. Eggman's face drops. He recounts that Gerald had become a hermit after his research aboard the Ark was pulled, and worse, Maria had gone missing. Nobody had seen her since the Ark was shut down when she was a child, and they could only assume that something awful had happened to the girl. After that, they didn't hear from Gerald for years, and it wasn't until recently that they had found out that he passed. After everything sinks in, Shadow is furious. He's not just furious with Gunn, but with himself. He hadn't been there to protect Maria, and now she was gone. He didn't even have Gerald to turn to for guidance. Angry and distraught, Shadow swears revenge on Gunn for all they've done to him and his family. Eggman is a bit disappointed that he didn't get his ultimate weapon, but he's intrigued by this new hedgehog he's found. So he asks Shadow how he plans to get revenge. Shadow smirks and grabs the Chaos Emerald from Eggman, saying to meet him up on the Ark and he'll explain there. From this point on, most of Sonic Adventure 2 will go about the same as it does originally, as Shadow's plan and motivation is similar enough to canon. It's not until we approach the finale aboard the Ark that things start to change. The most important difference in this version of events is Gerald's mindset being shifted. In this timeline, at the end of his life, Gerald had been disgraced. However, he had, in his mind, saved Maria, at least in some sense. He didn't swear vengeance on the world, though his viewpoint had become far more jaded. Still, he had no reason to set up his final revenge on the Ark, so the entire plot with the Ark hurtling towards the Earth just isn't in play. This means that Shadow's only real plan for revenge is the Eclipse Cannon itself. Beyond this, there's also the fact that Shadow's mindset is also ever so slightly different. As opposed to being the one leading the revenge plan, Shadow is sort of letting himself be led by Eggman to a degree. He started off not immediately wanting revenge, but wanting answers, which Eggman had provided. A result of Shadow being a bit more lost is that his interactions with Sonic and the others are a little bit different as well. He's at least somewhat more amicable to them. This is all the context we need to set up for the showdown between Shadow and Sonic on the Ark. Shadow opens by saying that Sonic has impressed him. Being able to perform chaos control with a fake emerald was something he'd never seen anyone do before. What exactly was Sonic? Sonic shrugs and says his famous line, but then he turns things around on Shadow. He asks him why he's doing all of this. Shadow says that Sonic wouldn't be able to understand, and besides, it doesn't matter anymore anyway. Sonic says that he's pretty sure he's heard that one before. Maybe he couldn't understand, but that doesn't mean that Shadow has to do this all alone. Shadow scoffs at Sonic's comment, and the two begin their battle afterward. They're evenly matched, and it seems like Shadow will succeed in stalling Sonic long enough for the Eclipse Cannon to fire. Sonic, this time, is caught between trying to reach out to Shadow and trying to defeat him, so his focus is less sharp, just enough for Shadow to have a bit more of an edge in the battle. However, at some point in their fight, Shadow hears Rouge call for him over the intercoms. Shadow brushes Rouge off and tells her to leave him alone. Rouge responds that she's pretty sure he wants to see this. Someone was here on the Ark from before. That gives Shadow pause, letting Sonic land a blow on him that sends him skidding across the ground. Immediately, Sonic notices the change in Shadow's posture. He rushes over to him, a bit defensive, and asks him what's happening. Shadow snaps at him and tells him to shut up before asking Rouge what the hell she's talking about. Rouge explains that someone, a small girl, has been frozen in stasis. She's alive, but she definitely isn't supposed to be here. Once Shadow hears this, a thought lights up in his head. He doesn't want to give himself hope, but he has to know. If there's even a chance that she's still alive, Shadow takes off, blowing past Sonic as he runs back into the Ark and asks Rouge where the girl is. Rouge gives Shadow her location, and Sonic runs to chase after Shadow, confused and curious as to what's happening. Shadow asks Sonic if he really has time for this, and Sonic jokes that he's the fastest thing alive. He always has time for a quick detour. Shadow is pretty annoyed by Sonic's attitude, and he uses Chaos Control to warp away, appearing next to Rouge. He turns and stares at the capsule in front of him, and inside of it, the body of a person he recognizes. It was Maria. She was alive. She was alive. Too many thoughts swirl inside of Shadow as he stares at her. Gerald was still gone, but he wasn't alone. Maria was here. He could still save her. Suddenly, Shadow realizes what he's done. The Earth was about to be destroyed, and with it, any chance of Maria having a normal life. He was truly about to destroy everything, and he realizes just how wrong he had been. He has to stop this. He has to save Maria, save everyone. Panicked, he turns to Rouge and asks how they can stop the Eclipse cannon. Rouge's eyebrows go up, and she makes a small comment about how all of this seems like a bit of a fast turnaround, but then says that the Eclipse cannon hasn't fired yet. If they go and remove the Chaos Emeralds, they should be able to stop it. At that point, Sonic whizzes by the chamber, then doubles back and rushes next to Shadow. He scowls at him, saying that it's cheating to teleport around like that. Then he sees Maria's frozen body and pauses. He asks what's going on, and Shadow says that there's just not time. They have to stop the Eclipse cannon now. Sonic is also confused by Shadow's quick change in attitude, but he seems earnest enough. He decides to trust Shadow for now, and the trio take off towards where Eggman is staying, arriving in the blink of an eye. Once they arrive, Eggman turns to them and grumbles. He asks what they're doing here, and Shadow says simply that Maria's alive. Eggman pauses at that and asks Shadow to repeat himself, but Shadow has no time for this. He tells Eggman to move so he can remove the Chaos Emeralds from the Eclipse Cannon, and Eggman says that he can't do that. Sonic dashes behind Eggman and tackles him to the ground, giving Shadow the go-ahead. And Shadow rips the emeralds out of the machine as Eggman shouts at him. At that moment, a siren goes off and warnings show up all over the screen in front of them. Sonic asks what's going on, and Eggman explains that removing the Chaos Emeralds from the Eclipse Cannon at this point has destabilized it. It needs to fire now, or the entire space station will explode and kill all of them. Who knows how much damage that blast would end up doing to the planet. They ask how they can stop it, and Eggman says that it can't be stopped. They only have two options: explode or fire the cannon. Shadow says that they can't let the Ark explode. It would kill Maria and all of them instantly. Rouge rolls her eyes and asks if he's okay with the world blowing up then, and he grumbles at her. Shadow says that with the power of the Chaos Emeralds, he may be able to achieve a form strong enough to stop the blast. Sonic, of course, perks up at that and says that he didn't realize Shadow had a super form too. With the two of them going super, they should be able to tank the blast from the Eclipse Cannon and prevent the destruction of the planet. Shadow just shakes his head. At this point, the blue hedgehog shouldn't even surprise him anymore. With that figured out, Sonic and Shadow take the Chaos Emeralds and channel their power to go super before flying off into space. Once they're in position, Eggman fires the Eclipse Cannon, and the two do their best to use their power and chaos control to prevent as much damage as possible. The only issue is just how painful it is. Their super forms protect them from any damage, but they can still feel the force of the attack. Of course, neither of them are going to give up. They both power through despite the pain, and eventually the threat is dealt with. As soon as the Eclipse Cannon has finished firing, Shadow chaos controls them back onto the Ark. Once there, he takes off for where Maria is being held. They all follow him, and soon everyone sans Eggman finds himself in front of the frozen Maria. Sonic asks where Eggman ran off to, and Rouge says that he fled while they were stopping the Eclipse Cannon. Sonic shakes his head and says that's fine. Rouge turns to Shadow and asks who the girl is. Shadow huffs and says that he doesn't have to tell her. He commands them to wake Maria up, but Rouge scoffs at him and responds that she's not going to do what Shadow says if he won't even explain to them who she is. Shadow really doesn't want to get into it, but with everyone's eyes on him and seemingly backing up Rouge, he doesn't feel like he has much of a choice. Shadow gives them the short version, at least the shortest version he can, but everyone keeps asking him all these questions. The fact that Maria is Eggman's cousin, that Shadow was raised by Eggman's grandfather, all of these trifling little details are things they latch onto like leeches and try to suck out as much information as they can. It's infuriating, but he deals with it. Once it's finally done, he asks Rouge to let Maria out once again, but she doesn't move. Rouge asks Shadow if he's absolutely sure about this. They don't know why Maria is frozen here, and if she really is terminally ill, they may be dooming her to pass away if they unfreeze her. Shadow feels himself growing angry at the suggestion that they should just leave Maria here, but he remains calm. Shadow says simply that Maria wouldn't have wanted this, that she was likely forced into stasis as he was. Sonic backs him up, saying that if they really need to and she asks them to do it, they can just freeze Maria again. At the very least, they can bring her down from the space station and to somewhere more safe. After their interjection, Rouge yields and begins to unfreeze Maria. Shadow can't help but be worried as he watches the liquid drain around Maria. He keeps going over tiny details that could have gone wrong. It had been 50 years. What if a tiny mistake had led to Maria's passing in that time? He shoves those thoughts aside as the unfreezing process is nearly completed. The door to Maria's pod opens and the girl stumbles forward. Shadow rushes forward to catch her, the others not far behind him. Shadow dares to call for Maria, asking if she's conscious. Slowly, she stirs in his arms, pushing herself upright. She looks at Shadow, her eyes unfocused, but recognition slowly comes over her features. She hugs Shadow and says that she never thought she'd see him again. Shadow can't help but hug her back. He says that he'll always be there to protect her from now on. Once they're done having their reunion, Maria turns to face the rest of the group. She asks Shadow who all these people are and what happened to Gerald. He had forced her into the chamber and frozen her, but she has no idea where he is now. Shadow's expression darkens, and he tells Maria that it's been 50 years. Gerald is gone. Maria can't believe what she's hearing. She nearly collapses before taking a seat on the ground, trying to process everything she's learned. Shadow sits next to her, and the two sit in silence for a while. The others all give them some time alone, sensing that they had a lot to talk about. Eventually, Maria begins speaking. He betrayed me. I told him I didn't want this, and he did it anyway. Everything and everyone I know is probably gone, and I just don't know what to do. Why would Gerald do this? Did he just not care about me? Shadow's answer is simple. He was hurting. He thought he had lost me, and he was worried he would lose you too. In his own way, I suspect that he wanted the best for the both of us. Maria shakes her head. I don't understand. How could someone care so deeply about you that they hurt you? Shadow doesn't have a response at first. Eventually, he settles on saying, sometimes people do things that don't make sense. After the words hang in the air for a moment, Shadow gets to his feet. He offers Maria a hand and tells her that he'll do his best to do right by her from now on. He knows exploring this new world will be scary, but she won't have to do it alone. Maria takes Shadow's hand and gets to her feet, then thanks him for being there. Shadow leads Maria away from the freezing chamber and towards the main observatory, where the others have congregated. Once they arrive, Maria smiles and asks Shadow if these are his new friends. Shadow immediately starts to say no, but Rouge grabs his shoulder and says that they're the best of friends while Shadow glares at her. This gets a laugh out of Maria, and the tension in the room begins to deflate. Everyone introduces themselves to Maria while Shadow watches. While everyone else is distracted, Rouge approaches him. Shadow mumbles something about not trusting the others, and Rouge says that he's just being paranoid. They're all good people. She looked into them. Besides, Maria would probably need someone around her age to spend time with. She couldn't just hang out with Shadow and nobody else. Shadow doesn't like it, but he doesn't argue. After some time, they all decided to head back down to the Earth. Maria couldn't stay on the Ark now that it was abandoned, and while this would make her sickness worse, they didn't have much of a choice. This put Shadow in a bit of a strange spot. Namely, he would need to get Maria a place to live. All of her family, sans Eggman, was gone, so it was really just him and the girl. Sure, he could just run around the world and sleep wherever, but Maria really needed a home to stay in. The entire thing was a hassle, but with a favor from Rouge, Shadow was able to find people willing to pay him for his skills, and they find an apartment in Central City for the time being. From there, they settle into a comfortable rhythm. Shadow runs around to do the odd mercenary job and dotes on Maria whenever he's around. Maria mostly just hangs out with Sonic and his friends when Shadow's not there, and sometimes when he is there despite Shadow's resistance. For the most part, it's quite a peaceful life. However, Maria's condition does begin to get worse now that she's back on the Earth. Everyone takes notice, and soon they ask Shadow if there's anything they can do. Shadow shakes his head. There's still research into NIDS, and until something is found, they'll just have to do what they can to make Maria comfortable. It's not like there's a second space station for Maria to stay on. Everyone nods in agreement at that, but Tails is a bit slower to respond. Shadow forgets about this interaction for about a week when he suddenly gets a call from the young fox. Tails says that he wants Shadow and Maria to come see him at his workshop, and Shadow nearly declines. However, he's pretty sure Maria would like to see Tails, so he says he'll come if only for her sake. Once they get there, Tails is ecstatic. He says that he has something amazing to show them and takes them to the back room of his laboratory. There, he shows them a huge room with reinforced glass windows and some medicine balls on the floor inside. Tails says that it's only a prototype, but he thinks he's got all the kinks worked out. Shadow is about to ask what all of this is when Tails flips a switch, causing the medicine balls in the chamber to start floating. Tails explains that it's a gravity chamber, and soon he'll be able to mimic the gravity on the Ark to help with Maria's condition. Shadow can't believe what he's seeing. Maria runs over to Tails and thanks him for doing this for her, and Tails says that it's no trouble. Besides, this type of technology can be used for all kinds of stuff beyond just helping to treat Maria and other NIDS patients. Shadow can't do anything but stare at the boy. They hadn't even asked him to do this. He had taken it upon himself to create this just to help them. It really stuck with Shadow, and he decided then and there that he needed to make it up to the young fox at some point. They spend some time discussing logistics from there, how to implement the gravity chamber into Maria's home so that it would be more effective and whatnot. They quickly come to the conclusion that they couldn't stay in an apartment anymore and they would need to move. The easiest way would be for them to move from the mainland to one of the islands and build a custom house there. Shadow had the funds for such a project, at least in terms of materials, and Tails said that he'd be more than willing to help build it for them. Shadow thanks him, and the two return to their home for the time being. This entire time, Eggman has been surprisingly quiet. Normally, it only took a month or two for him to come up with a new scheme, but he had been biding his time for several months now, with almost no one even catching sight of the man. Briefly, some of Sonic's friends wonder if Eggman had given up on conquering the world after seeing what had happened, but they kind of doubt that. There is one person that wants to see the best at Eggman though, and that's Maria. Maria had only known Ivo when they were young. Very young, before she had been taken aboard the Ark due to her illness, and she hadn't seen him since then. She also wasn't there for all of his previous schemes, only hearing about them from the others, and while she obviously knew that Eggman had done a lot of bad stuff, she wants to believe in her cousin. After all, he was some of the only family she had left, and she wasn't willing to just write him off like that. She brings this up with Shadow, but Shadow says that she can't see Eggman. He's a madman, far too dangerous to try and negotiate with, let alone to try and get him to change his ways. Maria says that they can't just give up on him. He's their family. Shadow snarls and says that if Eggman is really their family, he should be helping them instead of running off to play supervillain. Maria isn't convinced, but she's done arguing with Shadow about it. The two drop the subject for the time being, but Maria is still committed to trying to change Ivo's mind. Of course, Eggman can't stay away from his evil deeds for long. Soon he gets back to his old ways and kidnaps not only many animal critters, but manages to even get his hands on Tails and Knuckles as well as Vanilla. This leads into the events of Sonic Advance 2, and while Sonic is running off to stop the Doctor as normal, things are a bit different for Shadow in this timeline. We don't know what Shadow was doing at the time of Advance 2 in the original version of events. Maybe he was just busy or didn't get the word that all of this was happening, but this time around Maria was sort of friends with all of them, so she figured all of this out pretty quickly. As soon as she tells Shadow, he decides that he may as well help Sonic out. Maria says that she wants to come along as well. Her condition isn't hurting her that much today, but Shadow is staunchly against this. Maria complains that Shadow is being overprotective, but he ignores her. He tells her to stay at their house and rushes off, leaving Maria behind. As much as Maria wants to go and see Ivo anyway, she knows she can't go out there by herself. She isn't much stronger than the average 12-year-old, and Ivo's robots were really dangerous for the average person. Running out there would only put her and others in harm's way. Still, Maria decides that she has to do something. She can't just sit on the sidelines and never meet her cousin. Maria decides to spend some time thinking about it, even if she can't do anything today. Anyway, back with Sonic and Shadow, the plot of Advance 2 goes pretty easily for them. They're able to rescue all the people Eggman kidnapped, and Cream is reunited with her mother. It looks like everything is back to normal, but Shadow can't quite let things be. After they destroy the space station Eggman escapes to, Shadow is insistent that they hunt him down. Sonic tells him not to worry about it, but Shadow says he needs answers now. While Shadow hadn't said anything about it, a part of him wonders why Eggman is seemingly unaffected by the news that Maria was alive. He hadn't gotten to know the man very well in their short time together, only really bonding a bit with Rouge, but he had thought that Eggman respected his family more than this. In that time, Eggman had always spoken highly of Gerald, though looking back on it, he had almost never said anything about Maria. Shadow wanted answers. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like he would be getting any. Eggman was long gone, and tracking the man down was nigh impossible. They really didn't have any real options besides simply returning home and waiting. While they try to return to their normal lives, things are a bit strained between Shadow and Maria. The girl is quieter than normal, enough that Shadow asks Maria what's on her mind, but she just says that she's fine. When Shadow attempts to pry, Maria just says that she's a bit tired these days. She's been spending a lot of time working on something. Shadow tells Maria not to overwork herself, but Maria knows that Shadow is a bit overprotective at this point and says that she's taking care of herself. It takes a while for Shadow to learn what Maria is working so hard on. One day, he comes back from work and he sees Maria building some kind of machine. Shadow asks what she's doing, and Maria says that she's testing a prototype for a combat robot specifically. This surprises Shadow. He had assumed that Maria was just spending her time on some sort of hobby, like a model train or RC car or something. Shadow was also pretty impressed. While he had gotten used to Tails and Eggman building some truly crazy stuff, he also knew how much expertise and effort went into making these machines. Shadow can't help but ask why exactly Maria is suddenly interested in robotics. Maria says that it's the only way she'll be able to help Shadow and Sonic and all of the others, and more importantly, the only way she'll get a chance to meet Ivo. Once she's able to build machines that can contend with Eggman's, she'll be able to go into the field and maybe understand why he's like this. Shadow is completely against the idea. He says that it's way too dangerous for Maria to try and meet Eggman face to face. She could get killed. He won't allow her to risk her life like this. Maria says that Shadow is risking his life every time he fights Eggman, and she can't ever be there to protect him. Shadow argues that she doesn't need Maria to protect him. He's the ultimate life form. It's his job to protect her. Maria yells that Shadow isn't just the ultimate life form. He's her brother, and she doesn't want to lose him again. That makes Shadow remember, after everything that had happened, just how much Maria had been through without him. While Shadow had gone away to try and protect her, Maria had been dealing with her condition with only Gerald for support, and their relationship with their shared father was complicated at this point. But the most important thing that Shadow realizes in that moment was that Maria had made it through on her own. Maria wasn't just someone he needed to protect. She was a strong person in her own right. Someone who had helped him just as much as he had helped her. If he let his fear of Maria getting hurt control him, he could end up hurting her like Gerald had. With all of those thoughts in mind, Shadow says that Maria can do as she pleases, but he wants her to promise that she'll be safe. Maria promises that she will as long as Shadow does the same. Shadow laughs a bit at that and says that he hasn't found anything on this planet that could take him out yet and doesn't think he will anytime soon. The two laugh together for a moment and they both feel confident that they'll be able to protect each other. Over the next few months, Maria works with Tails to create a battle mech for herself, armed to the teeth with autonomous drones and other mostly non-lethal weaponry. Shadow spends some time sparring with Maria, though really it's just him working as target practice for her or testing various features on the mech they make. As far as Shadow can tell, Maria is taking to the process very well. From what he can gather, Tails outpaces the girl in terms of knowledge, but Tails says that Maria is catching on very quickly. Tails says that after just a few more months of study, he'll have nothing left to teach her. They'd be working as partners from then on. Maria also meets Cream for the first time while they're working on their machines, and the girls get along with each other perfectly. Maria especially loves Cheese and asks Shadow if they can adopt a Chow after seeing him. Shadow says maybe when they get all this robot stuff set up properly, they can get a pet. Maria rolls her eyes but doesn't argue. Still, they're able to finish the entire mech with very little trouble. Seemingly, the mech was finished in just the nick of time. Only a day after Maria and Tails finish their work, they get word that one of Eggman's robots is attacking a nearby city. Maria is ready to give her mech a try, and Shadow says that they can go and fight this threat together. They take off towards the town and discover that the robot in question is Metal Sonic. He's going on a rampage, tearing through building after building, but not attacking anyone in particular. Maria surmises that he's searching for something or someone, and Shadow nods. That at least lowers the chance of any injuries or casualties. They begin to pursue Metal Sonic, attempting to defeat the robot. As soon as Metal Sonic sees them, he begins to run away, clearly not wanting to deal with the two pursuers as strong as Shadow at the same time. Shadow laughs, saying that this should be relatively easy for them. While he hadn't dealt with Metal Sonic himself before, he had heard of him from Sonic and his friends. He doubted that Metal Sonic was anywhere near as powerful as they said. There's no way a mere machine could rival Sonic, and Sonic was the only thing that was even close to rivaling Shadow himself. Shadow pushes himself to go faster, pulling ahead of Maria and her mech and attacking Metal Sonic. However, by pulling himself out of position, he also gives Metal Sonic an opening. The robot attacks him, and the two are evenly matched, at least at first. Suddenly, in the middle of their fight, Metal Sonic completely disappears from Shadow's sight, and he feels a sharp pain in his side. Metal's claws dig into his flesh, injuring him. The ultimate lifeform instantly recognizes what's happened. Chaos control. Turning to see Metal Sonic, Shadow can see a Chaos Emerald in Metal's hand. Shadow falls to the ground, hurt, and Metal Sonic readies himself for a killing blow when he's struck by a stray bullet. Maria appears in front of Shadow, having now caught up with the two much faster fighters, and aims her weapons at Metal. The robot sputters, eyes flickering between them, and suddenly he turns tail and runs rather than continue their battle. As soon as he's gone, Maria jumps out of her mech into Shadow's side. She asks him if he's going to be okay, and Shadow says that he'll be fine. He's very sturdy. He probably just needs to go to the hospital to get patched up. Maria nods and she picks up Shadow using her drones and brings him to the nearest hospital. From there, some time passes. While Metal did escape their grasp, it seems that Shadow's gonna make a full recovery in almost no time. He'll be out of it for a couple days at most with how fast he heals. News of the event spread, and it's not long before Sonic and Tails appear to ask Maria and Shadow for more information. Maria explains since Shadow was recovering from his injury that Metal Sonic had seemingly been searching for something around the area, and he used Chaos Control to defeat Shadow. Maria speculates that using the Chaos Emerald damaged Metal in some way, given how erratic his behavior was afterward. Tails asks Maria what Metal could have been looking for, and Maria says that she doesn't know. Sonic laughs and says that he was probably looking for another Chaos Emerald, considering he had grabbed one already. Eggman is always trying to get his greedy little hands on those things. The others aren't convinced, but Sonic says they can ask around the town and see if they have an emerald or anything else valuable around. That seems like a good enough plan for now. Maria says that she'll stay with Shadow while Sonic and Tails do some investigation. Sonic and Tails spend some time talking with the locals and find out that they did recently have a Chaos Emerald in the city, but it had been transported to the mainland for safekeeping. Metal Sonic therefore was likely working off of incomplete information. With all that in mind, Sonic decides that they should try and grab as many Chaos Emeralds as they can before Eggman can. Tails says he'll relay this to Maria and Shadow once he wakes up and gets a move on. Maria, Tails, and Shadow have a brief conversation back at the hospital, and they all agree with Sonic's plan to find as many Chaos Emeralds as possible. They'll have to wait a day for Shadow to finish healing, but once that's done, they'll be on the move once again. They give Tails a quick goodbye, and he runs off to meet up with Sonic. The next day, Shadow is already healed from his injury, an upside of being the ultimate life form. He and Maria prepare to leave town when they get word that another one of Eggman's robots has appeared. They rush over to where it is and see a large, bulky robot armed with various weapons. It's a robot neither of them recognize, but I'm sure everyone watching knows who this is. Omega aims his guns at them, announcing that he is, thus far, Eggman's most dangerous creation and that he was made specifically to destroy both Sonic and Shadow. He will not accept their surrender. They prepare to battle, but before they can, they hear Eggman's voice call out over some sort of intercom. He tells Omega to ignore them and focus on finding Metal Sonic. Omega freezes for a moment before giving a quick "yes, sir" and turning away from the two. As he begins to flee, Maria asks Shadow if they should chase him. Shadow considers it for a second before saying no. Fighting the robot here would only endanger people, and Eggman had no reason to lie to them and say that Omega was searching for Metal Sonic rather than the Chaos Emeralds. It seemed that this Omega had little to do with what they were focusing on at the moment. It was better to continue their search rather than waste time fighting one of Eggman's many machines. Still, it was notable that Eggman was seemingly searching for Metal Sonic. They couldn't imagine why such a thing would be necessary. It was something to keep in mind at the very least. They continue their search, and near an Eggman base, they happen upon a familiar face. Rouge, of all people, was poking around in the doctor's business. Shadow can't help but wonder what she's doing here. She had been around since the incident on the Ark, but she always kept her cards close to her chest, fitting for someone of her job description. Shadow asks Rouge what Gun wants from the doctor, and Rouge says that that's strictly confidential. Though, since it is Shadow of all people, she could make a small exception given the circumstances. Gun had found that something aboard the Ark had been stolen since they were there, and they wanted Rouge to retrieve it for them. Shadow asks what it is that had been stolen, and Rouge says that she doesn't know. Gun really wanted to keep whatever it was that had gone missing under wraps, and to minimize the risk of any leaks, they wouldn't even tell Rouge what it was she was searching for to get rid of any sort of paper trail. She'd have to figure out what it was by investigating the Egghead's personal files and destroying them all as she went. Shadow tells Rouge that they and Sonic believe that Eggman is currently after the Chaos Emeralds, but Rouge rebuts him. According to Gun intelligence, the Eggman Empire had been surprisingly quiet recently. Outside of a few key robots on the run, he hasn't done much of anything. It wasn't anything at all like his previous attempts to scour the planet for the Chaos Emeralds. This obviously contradicts the fact that Metal Sonic had been searching for the Chaos Emeralds earlier. They relay that information to Rouge, and none of them can make heads or tails of all these little details. After they finish talking about all of the business stuff, a wry smile crawls over Rouge's lips and she turns to Maria. She notes that she hasn't actually gotten to see much of Shadow's sister, and she was just so cute. Rouge approached Maria and started asking her questions. If she made all these machines herself, did she have any embarrassing stories about Shadow, how much would Rouge need to pay to see those embarrassing stories about Shadow, etc. Maria can't help but laugh at Rouge's antics. She notes that Shadow isn't this friendly with most of Sonic's friends. Rouge and Shadow must be rather close. Rouge smiles and says that of course they are. Shadow saved Rouge's life back when they were working with... Before Rouge can finish that sentence, Shadow loudly interrupts her. He says that he helped Rouge out when they were both working with Gun. Shadow had joined as a cover to get into the Ark. Maria stares at Shadow and Rouge for a moment, and Rouge shoots Shadow an incredulous look, but Maria just smiles and says that's great. Maria says that she'll go ahead and hack into Eggman's servers to see if he has any info on the location of the other emeralds. Rouge can have access to the servers once she's done with them. Rouge nods. While she wouldn't normally, and according to Gun should never, allow a civilian first crack at info from an enemy, she wants to talk to Shadow right now. As soon as Maria is out of earshot, Rouge asks Shadow what all of that was about. Shadow tries to be evasive, but Rouge draws the truth out of him pretty quickly. Shadow eventually admits that Maria didn't know that he had been working with Eggman, and didn't know that it was Shadow's idea to use the Eclipse Cannon to destroy the Earth. He didn't want Maria to see that side of him. Rouge rolls her eyes and sighs dramatically before saying that Maria's gonna find out eventually. It was kind of a big deal after all. Shadow's not gonna be able to keep this a secret forever. Shadow is silent, but he then says that he'll tell her himself soon. He just wants to do it the right way. Rouge isn't buying it, but she isn't Shadow's mother, so she's not gonna nag him about it. In the server room, Maria is ruminating on what's going on. She's not stupid. She could tell that Shadow was hiding something from her, and she had taken the opportunity to escape from them to let out some of her frustration. It did hurt to realize that Shadow, the one person she trusted more than anyone else, who she would trust with anything, was keeping secrets from her. It was his right to some degree, but Maria couldn't help but feel the need to fix whatever was broken between them, whatever distance kept Shadow from confiding his feelings in her. Or maybe she was being too harsh. Shadow could tell her what was going on when he was ready after all. There was no reason to get impatient. At least that's what Maria tells herself as she hacks into Eggman's servers and scans for any relevant information. While she had expected to find very little of use within Eggman's servers, what she finds is actually very interesting. As soon as she's done, Maria runs to Shadow and Rouge to tell them what she had found. Metal Sonic had gone rogue. He was no longer taking orders from Eggman, and he was going after the Chaos Emeralds all on his own. This new information filled a few holes for all of them. While they're discussing this turn of events, even more news comes in. Omega had apparently successfully tracked down Metal Sonic. Omega, Eggman, and Metal Sonic were currently engaged in a battle not too far away. Shadow decides that they should intervene. Metal Sonic had a Chaos Emerald, and keeping it away from Eggman would be in their interests. Not to mention that keeping Metal Sonic out of Eggman's hands would deprive the Doctor of a valuable resource. Rouge says that she can't come with them, unfortunately. She needs to investigate more of the Doctor's bases to find whatever it is that he's stolen. They give each other a quick goodbye, and Shadow and Maria rush to where Metal Sonic and Omega are battling each other. The three had found each other deep inside a jungle area, destroying the vegetation around them as they send bullets and lasers flying in every direction. They've already worn each other out by the time Shadow and Maria arrive, the metal bodies of the robots in the Eggmobile all showing signs of wear. Eggman laughs when he sees Maria's mech, saying that he didn't think she would take after his side of the family. Maria isn't sure how to respond. They don't actually get much time to chat, though, as Metal Sonic and Omega get back to their battle almost immediately. Shadow and Maria join in, all three groups fighting over the Chaos Emerald Metal Sonic has. During the battle, Metal Sonic uses his high speed to outmaneuver the slower members of the battle, with Shadow and Omega being the only ones who are able to keep up with him. He's able to leave Eggman and Maria far behind. Now alone, the two slowly cease their fighting. Silently, they both know that they have something more important to do. Maria asks Eggman why he's doing this. Why is he trying to take over the world? Why would he bring so much suffering to everyone? Eggman says that it's not something she would understand at her age. Not quite yet. He says that he realized long ago that the world was foolish, corrupt, inefficient, and unable to recognize true brilliance. He wanted to improve the world. All the war, all the sickness and death that existed everywhere, he could get rid of all of it. All the world had to do was recognize his genius. Maria asks if Ivo really believes all of that, and Eggman laughs. He says maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's just what he says to try and justify all of this to himself. All he really knows is that he's not content to stay on the sidelines. He won't just make brilliant invention after brilliant invention and watch fools like Gunn waste them. What's the point of creating the best weapons, the best medicine, the best machinery in the world if you had to hand it over to simpletons who would only use it to make the world worse? Surely Maria could understand that much. And Maria does understand Eggman's frustration. She remembered how Gunn stole Shadow from her, how they wanted endless weapons of war, and how little they cared for Gerald's true passion for science. But she still couldn't agree with Eggman's misanthropic worldview. Maria wants to believe in the world, believe in its people. Everyone wants the world to be a better place. Everyone has people they care about. If they just focus on that, surely they can push all of their differences aside. The things that unite them are deeper, stronger than the things that separate them. After she finishes making her impassioned plea, Eggman can only stare at her, something sad crossing over his face. I remember when I used to think that way. I used to be wide-eyed, naive. It's almost nostalgic to see somebody so innocent. But it won't last. It never does. Someday you'll come to your senses. Maria can't help but get frustrated. She couldn't stand being talked down to like this. She argues that the world is full of good people. Most people are good. They could reach out to them. They can fix all of the pain Eggman is worried about without controlling them. Eggman just shakes his head. Gerald was a good man, wasn't he? Did that stop him from hurting you? Maria freezes. She doesn't have a response, and Eggman knows that. It doesn't matter if they're good people. We're all a little rotten at our core, aren't we? I think someone who grew up with Gerald and Shadow should know that better than most. That makes Maria angry. Shadow's done nothing wrong. He's never hurt anybody. Don't bring him into this. Eggman pauses for a second before erupting into laughter at her response. This makes Maria grow even more enraged, demanding to know what Eggman finds so funny. Unbelievable. He didn't tell you. Maria, how do you think I found out about the Eclipse Cannon? Whose idea do you think it was to use it to control the world, to take our revenge on it? Maria shakes her head. No, that can't be true. It can't be. Shadow would never do such a thing. Eggman interrupts her. And yet he did. Shadow was so hurt by your loss that he decided that the world wasn't worthy of continuing without you. His mirth slowly fades away. I told you, didn't I? We're all rotten at our core. We're all capable of awful things if someone just pushes us far enough. Maria has nothing to say. Eggman knows that he's won this little battle between them, and there's no point in fighting anymore. I'll leave you to think about this on your own. I have a robot and an emerald to recover. With that, he flies off, leaving Maria alone with her thoughts. Several miles away, 3 creations of the Robotnik family are fighting, each for their own cause. Of the 3, Metal Sonic is the worst for the wear. Fighting off both Omega and Eggman before Shadow and Maria even arrived left him more damage than the others, and they were all exploiting that weakness. It's not long before his sluggishness catches up with him. Omega manages to grab a hold of Metal Sonic, claws tearing into his steel body. Metal Sonic reaches for his Chaos Emerald, attempting to perform Chaos Control, but Omega snatches it away from him before he can do anything. Shadow then descends upon Omega, fighting over the Emerald, and Omega tosses Metal Sonic to the side. Shadow manages to get the upper hand, nearly defeating Omega when he's shot by a weapon from behind. He turns around to see that Eggman has arrived, Maria nowhere in sight. Shadow scowls and asks Eggman where Maria is. The man says that the girl is safe. It's his own safety that Shadow should be concerned with at the moment. On cue, Omega attacks and Shadow narrowly dodges his fire. The battle continues on and Shadow is clearly losing his edge in the fight. Omega was already nearly as strong as Shadow is. Having to fight him and Eggman at the same time split Shadow's attention and made it difficult for him to protect himself. Shadow feels himself losing and curses under his breath. He begins wondering what he can do when he spots Maria in the background. He attacks Omega, hoping that Maria will back him up, and she comes through. She keeps Eggman off of him as Shadow uses his last burst of energy to damage Omega. He can't quite get a hold of the Chaos Emerald, but the tide seems to be turning. It seems that Eggman agrees, and he tells Omega that they're going to retreat. Shadow says that he won't allow Eggman to escape him again. Unfortunately, they have a critical advantage that Shadow and Maria can't neutralize, the Chaos Emerald. Eggman plugs it into the Eggmobile and teleports them away. Only a few hundred yards, but far enough that Shadow can't easily hit them. With their speed and repeated teleports through Chaos Control, they'll outpace him before Shadow can make up the difference. Frustrated, Shadow turns to Metal Sonic, who's terribly damaged on the ground. The robot is largely non-functional, his limbs and engine all broken and his head dented and torn. As Maria approaches, Shadow says they should take Metal back with them. There's no reason to give Eggman such a powerful weapon back. However, Maria doesn't respond. Shadow is confused and he calls out for her. Slowly, Maria begins speaking. Shadow, is it true? Was the Eclipse Cannon really your idea? The question hangs in the air. Shadow's silence is all the answer Maria needs. She can't help but tear up. Shadow wants to comfort her, but he has no idea how. Not when he's the one who caused all of this. I don't understand. I trusted you. I thought I knew you. Shadow, why? How could you do something so awful? Shadow forces an answer out. He feels like honesty is the least he can do for Maria right now. I was angry. I thought that they had taken you away from me, Maria. I thought you were gone and someone needed to pay. There has to be some justice in this world. If no one else will fight for that justice, then I will. Wouldn't you want justice too if someone took me away from you, Maria? Maria does her best to understand. I would want justice. I did when I thought I lost you on the Ark, but hurting them won't change anything. It wouldn't have brought you back, and it won't bring me back, Shadow, when you lose me. Shadow tenses up. If, not when, Maria. I won't let anyone or anything take you from me, and that includes your disease. Maria interrupts him. Don't. Just please don't. Shadow, I don't want empty promises. I know that this disease is gonna take me away from you eventually. That's scary. I know it scares you too, but I don't want that fear to stop me from loving being alive. And I don't want that pain to control you. Please, Shadow, promise me. Promise me that you'll learn to live, even when I'm gone. Shadow can't force himself to speak through the lump in his throat. He nods and Maria hugs him. He squeaks out that he promises he'll never do something so foolish ever again, and he apologizes. He apologizes over and over. Maria forgives him, and they take some time to recover from their conversation. Once they have their feelings sorted out, they grab Metal Sonic and return home. Maria sends a message to Tails about what happened, at least the short version of it. Soon they get word back from Sonic. He says that he's met up with a lot of their friends, and basically everyone's been pitching in to look for all the emeralds. They found 5 of them so far, and they're pretty sure the last 2 are both in Eggman's hands. At the very least, they managed to stop things from getting as bad as they could. Maria says that they should all meet up somewhere and find a place to keep the emeralds safe, as well as figure out what to do with Metal Sonic. Everyone agrees. A short while later, everyone is gathered at Tails' laboratory. Maria and Tails work together to repair Metal Sonic, at least enough to get some answers out of him after Tails had hooked him up to a speaker so he could talk. Metal isn't particularly cooperative, but he recognizes that it's in his best interest to tell them what's going on. Metal reveals that since before the incident on the Ark, Eggman had been working on an upgraded form for Metal called Neo Metal Sonic. Metal was excited for an upgrade, an opportunity to finally prove himself superior to his loathsome copy. But suddenly, Eggman abandoned the project. Eggman had found something else to focus on, and improving Metal was the furthest thing from his mind. So, for days and days on end, Metal sat alone in a dark room, abandoned once again. At some point, Metal realized that Eggman didn't care about him, that maybe he never cared. Metal never dared entertain such silly thoughts as the Doctor being sentimental towards him, but Metal at least thought that Eggman was proud of him. He was Eggman's greatest creation, his proudest achievement. At least, he had believed that until now. The realization that Eggman had given up on him hit hard, and Metal decided that he should take matters into his own hands. His plan was to gather the Chaos Emeralds for himself and use them to become powerful enough to defeat Sonic on his own. Then he would turn his wrath onto Eggman and show him what he was really made of. With Metal's story out in the open, they all take some time to figure out what they should do with him. Shadow suggests simply locking Metal Sonic up, considering that he's still intent on killing Sonic, but Maria interjects. She says that she has a better idea. Maria tells Metal Sonic that she'll make him more powerful enough to surpass Sonic, on the condition that he not use that power to hurt anyone. She'll be poking around in his code so she can make sure he keeps up that promise too. Everyone is kind of shocked by the offer, and Shadow pulls Maria aside to ask what she's doing. Maria says that Metal isn't just a robot. He's capable of thinking. He's sentient. Metal is a person. He's Eggman's son, and that makes him family. Shadow can't help but sigh, knowing that Maria's made up her mind already. So you're gonna try and save him too, huh? Maria smiles and nods. She says that she's certain she can help Metal change. Besides, she can at least make sure he isn't dangerous if she's the one working on him. Shadow relents and he tells the others that it's fine. They're all a bit suspicious, but they trust the two of them enough to allow Maria to work on Metal Sonic. Afterwards, they decide to keep the Chaos Emeralds to themselves and all hide them in secure location as they wait for Eggman's next move. His next move is apparently very soon. The next day, Tails gets a message from an unknown source. He checks it cautiously, just to make sure it's nothing, but discovers it's an encrypted message from Rouge. She's deep within an Eggman base, and she's found something horrible. She needs them to come there immediately. Eggman is creating something too dangerous this time. Tails is obviously worried by this, so he sends a message to everyone available as soon as he gets the chance. They all head to the coordinates Rouge gave them, each wondering exactly what it is Eggman had in store for them this time around. Sonic is the first to arrive on the scene, thanks to his speed and how close he was to the coordinates at the time. Once he arrives, he approaches the situation as he does most, ramming himself at full speed into any robot and tearing it to shreds. It works perfectly, as usual, and Sonic manages to make his way deep into Eggman's base with little trouble. As he does, the number of badniks decreases dramatically, until soon, Sonic is walking through dark, empty hallways, completely alone. It's strangely eerie how quiet everything is. Sonic stops to wonder where exactly Rouge and Eggman are when he hears someone cry out. It's guttural, pained, something Sonic has never heard before, and it sends a chill down his spine. He rushes towards the source of the noise, and soon he comes face to face with... He's not even sure how to describe it. It's a massive lizard, the size of a 3-story building at least, but there are so many things clearly wrong with it. Bits of metal and tubes are stuck into its skin, pumping a viscous green fluid around its body. Patches of its scales have been pushed aside as raw, red flesh pushes outward. It's growing. Every passing second, the lizard gets larger and larger, its skin and muscle being stretched and torn to account for its new mass. It seems as if the lizard can hardly even move. All it can do is scream in agony. Sonic just stares at the creature, completely stunned by just how horrible what he's seeing is. He's shaken out of his stupor by a hand yanking on his shoulder. Rouge pulls him aside, and as soon as he gets his bearing, he asks Rouge what that thing is. Rouge scowls and says it's the prototype for the ultimate life form, a failure that had been locked away on the Ark before Gerald created Shadow. Sonic asks why it's here, and Rouge gestures behind Sonic and says that he should ask him. The person responsible, Eggman, grunts behind Sonic, causing him to spin around and glare at him. Sonic asks Eggman how he could do something this cruel. That lizard is suffering just by existing. This was way beyond anything Eggman had done before. Eggman frowns and says that he didn't do anything. All he did was give the biolizard enough energy to continue living. Everything about it was designed by Gerald. Sonic pauses for a moment. He turns to stare back down the hallway towards the biolizard, its screams echoing around the area. Eggman continues. He says that he's sure that his grandfather considered the unfortunate circumstances of the biolizard's creation one of his greatest failures. It's disturbing to see, even for Eggman, despite how fascinating the science behind its existence is. It's difficult for anyone to look at a creature and not feel as if something horrible has happened. But the biolizard exists, and not using it for its intended purpose would be a grave error. The goal of Project Shadow was to achieve immortality, and to do that, they needed to find a way to combat all manner of diseases. Shadow and the biolizard could offer them a way to cure illnesses that no one on the planet could treat otherwise. This was what Gerald had hoped to achieve more than anything, and after everything that has happened, Eggman had decided that his grandfather's legacy shouldn't be abandoned quite yet. He would see to it now that Project Shadow was completed. Rouge tells Eggman that he's insane. This is way too reckless. The biolizard could grow without limit with enough energy, and they had no idea how far this would go. Sonic feels a terrible sinking feeling in his stomach as he puts two and two together, but he needs to hear it from Eggman directly. He asks Eggman what he did to the biolizard. Eggman answers that the biolizard was running low on energy, near starving, one of the few things that could still threaten its life. He had simply given it a new battery, one that would never run out. All he did was feed it a Chaos Emerald. The sound of tearing metal takes over the room. Sonic rushes back to the biolizard to see it's grown to massive size, over 10 times the size it was only a few short minutes ago. And it's still growing. Its sheer size had destroyed the walls of the laboratory, sending metal and concrete falling to the floor below. Sonic doesn't have any more time to think. He launches into battle, attempting to strike down the creature before it can hurt anyone else. It's around this time that others begin to arrive. The next person on the scene is Shadow. He needs no explanation to know what's happening here. Shadow glares at Eggman before attacking the biolizard alongside Sonic. The others filter in slowly. Tails, Amy, Cream and Cheese, and Maria all arrive. Maria is horrified by what she sees and eventually explains what's happening to all of the others. The battle between the two hedgehogs and the biolizard is at a standstill. The creature is regenerating from all forms of damage faster than they can inflict it, but it's not growing anymore. They all prepare to join the fight when Tails stops them. Tails says that they don't have the firepower to destroy the biolizard available, even with all of their might combined. They'll need something greater to destroy it for good. Rouge says that it's not like they have a lot of options. The biolizard has one of the Chaos Emeralds, so the boys' shiny forms are off the table. Even if they go and grab another emerald, it's not like Chaos Control would tip the scales much in their favor. Tails turns to Eggman and asks if he has anything in his arsenal that could help, and Eggman scoffs and says that if he did, he would have already used it. Omega and a few of his mechs could help, but they don't have the firepower to put down the biolizard for good. They all spend some time arguing about how they could do more damage to the creature when suddenly Amy interrupts them. She says that she just realized something. They wouldn't have to destroy the biolizard if they could just take away its Chaos Emerald, right? Tails says that that's probably correct, but how could they possibly do that? Then Amy asks if neutralizing the Chaos Emerald would be enough, and Tails realizes what Amy is suggesting. The Master Emerald can counteract the power of the Chaos Emeralds. If they could use that, they could stop the problem at its source. Of course, to do that, they'd need to bring the Master Emerald all the way here from Angel Island, and who knows where that is at the moment. Rouge chuckles and says that she usually keeps tabs on Angel Island. She could get over there in no time and grab the Master Emerald for them, as long as the knucklehead will let her grab it. Amy says that she should take Cream and go to Angel Island as soon as possible. They'll hold off the biolizard for now. Rouge asks why she would take Cream specifically, and Amy says that it'll make sense when she gets there. They all begin fighting the biolizard to buy Rouge and Cream time. Luckily for them, Angel Island is only about half an hour away at the time. She tells Cream to hold on and begins flying toward the island as fast as her wings can take her. All Rouge can do now is hope that the others can hold off long enough. They arrive on Angel Island soon, and immediately Knuckles is interrogating Rouge as to why she's on his island. However, his attitude softens once he sees Cream. He asks what they're doing here, and Rouge explains the situation. Knuckles is concerned, but the idea of giving Rouge of all people the Master Emerald for safekeeping makes him pause. Cream tells Knuckles that they really need the Master Emerald and gives him some puppy dog eyes. Rouge catches on to what she's doing pretty much immediately. She starts talking about how cruel you'd have to be to say no to such a cute, innocent girl like Cream, and Knuckles gives up. He tells Rouge that they can borrow the Master Emerald, but he's gonna be coming with them. No funny business. Rouge says that she literally wouldn't dream of it when the stakes are this high. She's not that heartless. With that, Knuckles touches the Master Emerald and uses its power to lower Angel Island into the ocean, safely this time. Then he lifts the Master Emerald out of its shrine. The return trip will be slower, but they should be back soon enough to stop the biolizard at least. Once they finally arrive, things are in bad shape. Most of their friends are down for the count, with Sonic, Shadow, and Amy being the only ones who are still on their feet, and Amy only just barely. As soon as they arrive, Rouge tells Knuckles to get started. He nods and places a hand on the Master Emerald once more. The emerald glows and the biolizard roars in response. Eventually, the Master Emerald stops glowing and Knuckles announces that it's done. The power of the Chaos Emeralds has been neutralized. Once that's finished, Knuckles launches into the fray alongside Sonic and Shadow. Rouge pulls Amy to the side and asks how everyone is doing. Amy says they'll all live. Eggman and Maria have retreated and they're gearing up for a final strike as soon as the opportunity arises. They have a battle plan, they just need to get across the finish line. Rouge nods and she calls out the information to the three still fighting the biolizard. They confirm that they're ready, and with one last push of effort, Sonic and Shadow strike the biolizard with everything they have. It's left clearly injured, bleeding and broken. Knuckles, the only fighter still left standing, stares down at it silently. He doesn't quite understand what all led up to this, but he knows that what they just finished fighting isn't evil. It's not even malevolent. It's just a wild animal lashing out. While Knuckles is thinking about all of this, he gets a signal from Rouge. He takes off, and a volley of gunfire from Eggman's forces deal the final blow to the biolizard. Once the dust settles, they all look onto the biolizard's carcass. No one has anything to say. As the dread of what has happened slowly sinks in, Sonic snaps at Eggman. He yells that this was ridiculous. All of this, it was a stupid monument to Eggman's ridiculous sense of pride. Sonic yells and screams, asking Eggman what the point of any of this even was. Eggman responds that the point was simple. The point was to finish what his grandfather started, and he had succeeded. Seemingly without a care in the world, Eggman walks deeper into his laboratory while Sonic asks what he's doing. They all slowly follow the man, curious as he turns on a computer that had survived the battle. Eggman gestures toward the screen and explains what it is he had actually done. With all of the advances in modern science and technology over the past 50 years, Eggman was in a much better position to study the ultimate life form than Gerald was. By studying the biolizard and analyzing the data from its rapid growth due to the Chaos Emerald, Eggman had gotten closer to creating the living cure than his grandfather had ever been able to. The actual perfect life form, one immune to any disease that could cure anything, was seemingly impossible, but he had gotten closer than anyone before him, and he believed that this data could be used to cure and treat many people that they had previously thought would suffer for the rest of their lives. Slowly, Eggman turns to Maria with a smile and announces that he's finally finished his grandfather's work. He can't make a cure, but he's quite confident that he can make a new treatment for NIDS. Eggman is confident that Maria and everyone else who is suffering from the same disease would be able to live into their elderly years. At first, Maria is too shocked to even react. Slowly, she falls to her knees, shaking her head, saying that this can't be true over and over. She almost doesn't want to believe it, doesn't want to get her hopes up only to have them dashed all over again. Shadow rushes toward Eggman and tells him that if he's lying, he'll make him regret it for the rest of his life. Eggman says that he's sure. NIDS was one of his primary areas of study when analyzing the biolizard in his grandfather's honor. Sonic asks Eggman why he did this. He wasn't the type to do something for somebody else without getting something in return. Eggman said that he wasn't doing this for anybody else. This was about the Robotnik family's legacy, a legacy he was a part of. He did this for his own glory. Knuckles shakes his head. He says that he doesn't like it. Even if they got something good out of it, this was cruel beyond words. Rouge says that, of course, this is all completely unethical. Really, the entirety of Project Shadow was a whole potluck of human rights violations. But then she turns to Shadow and says quietly that, as awful as all this has been, they at least got a few good things out of it. Over the next coming months, various treatments and cures are made from Eggman's data. The man himself returns to his old ways, as everyone expected. A treatment for NIDS is made quickly, and it's as Eggman said. The disease couldn't be cured, but from what they could tell, it was no longer terminal. That didn't mean it was easy to live with, though. There were still days where Maria was in intense pain or had difficulty moving, but they were fewer and further between. For her part, Maria spends her time upgrading Metal Sonic and attempting to befriend him. It's a slow process, but she's sure she'll be able to get him to come around eventually. Eggman had attempted to get Metal Sonic back, but Shadow and the others had repelled him at every turn, so he gives up for the time being. He's sure that Metal Sonic will return to him in due time anyway. Things were by no means over. They all still had a lot of life ahead of them. Maria had a lot of life ahead of her, and she would always be thankful for that. And that's the end of this What If, at least for now. I'm considering continuing this a little bit into the future, giving Metal Sonic a bit more love and all that, but it would kind of depend on if I can find a new good end point for the story, so I'll keep thinking about it, but no promises. Anyway, if you like this content, please consider subscribing and maybe even becoming a member of the channel. Members get access to all of my content at least a day early. And they also all get shouted out at the end of every video. Big shoutouts to Elric111, Agent B7, Bokabara, Sonic Storm, Joseph Florian, Fate Testarossa, Shredding Pixels, Jojo Nono 2, and GB484.